Okay, patch 5.3 Genshin Impact is gonna be huge because not only are some of the newer best 5-star Natlin character are gonna be coming, but we are getting a ton of different type of event and I can't absolutely wait for it. It's a funny thing though, this time around the patch is quite literally on the 1st of January in 2025, which is definitely gonna be huge. But the whole point of this video, everyone, is as usual, we're gonna be discussing the 5-star character coming in patch 5.3. It's been a while since we last had 2 new 5-star character coming within a single patch, so it's going to be a lot of things for you guys. But obviously we're going to be discussing everything that there is in this video so that you guys can have basically a detailed understanding of these characters, as well as I'm going to be providing my personal opinion on whichever the character are best for you to invest in 5.3. So hopefully that's going to be a very helpful video for you. Natlin is finally here, and of course that comes with many new characters that you would want to pull, and I can guarantee you that Mavuika is going to be on the list. Now if you're planning to swipe for pulling, then don't forget to check out Loot Bar. If you know me, I've been recommending you guys Loot Bar before, since you can always save almost a 20% on all of your top-ups. With over 100,000 orders and so many good reviews at this point, you can be sure that Loot Bar is trustworthy. To demonstrate it to you, I've been topping up my Genshin account through Loot Bar, buying the highest Genshin package. The only information you would need to fill out is going to be your UID and server region. Then go through the checkout process. After completing, the top-ups will come to your account within 5 minutes. Usually it just comes instantly for me. Here you can see my order receipt of all of my top-ups that I have done. So guys, be sure to check out Loot Bar through the link in my description, as it can be a great way for you to save your money, especially if you are topping up a large amount. Alright guys, first we're going to be looking at our lovely Mavuika. Finally, she is here. Technically, she is the longest Archon for us to wait until she's playable whenever we hit a single region. I believe that Farina was the setting record because she is in 4.2 until we got to play her, but that waiting time is definitely worth it because oh my god, she is probably shaping up to be literally the best character in the whole entire game, potentially power creeping every single DPS character out there. And yes, Nouvellette is also affected by Mavuika's future release in a week's time. So first off, to actually diving more in depth into her specific skill, you're not going to be looking into her normal attack that much guys, so we can leave that out. Her kit starts during her E skill. Now her E skill has 2 options, a tap and a hold. With a tap, you're basically activating her E skill, and then you're just gonna have a fiery ring behind your back. I think it's pretty similar to Raiden Shogun because whenever you cast Raiden's E skill, you're also gonna have an electro ring behind your back. So this time around it's gonna be a fiery ring. Now, if you want to hold it, it gets interesting because you actually get a Mavuika on a motorbike version running around and crushing your enemies. Now, overall, this looks fun, but it's more going to be applicable whenever you are in the overworld and want to traverse. It's not going to be too ideal using this in battle because it actually takes up a lot of her on-field time, and as well it actually doesn't do that much damage for you. Also, it shares the same cooldown of 15 seconds, so wow, you just might as well use tapping to save your time, and that technically is okay. But what's more important about her skill is I want to give your attention toward her skilling, because here's the thing, it actually has very good skilling. If you don't remember, for a sub DPS character like Xiangling, if we were to look into her Pyronado skilling, Mavuika E skill skilling is actually pretty good compared to Xiangling. So considering that Mavuika can actually just cast the E skill and completely switch off field while also doing pyro damage once every 2 seconds, it can give her the ability to be a very good sub DPS character, very much competitive towards Xiangling. Now moving on into her elemental burst, this is a more important thing for Mavuika. So So Mavuika Elemental Burst does not have energy requirement, but instead it is replaced with a Fighting Spirit stack. Now, how you're able to trigger her Elemental Burst is that she requires at least a 50% Fighting Spirit in order for you to get her burst. Her Fighting Spirit limit is 200, therefore you need at least 100 Spirit stack to cast her burst. So how you get these stacks are either the number of Night Cell point consumed by any of your party member will count toward the stack, or whenever any of your party member no more attack hit your opponent, it is counted toward a 1.5 spirit stack gain. So considering that Mavuika E skill will have an 80 Night Cell points limit, let's say you are able to convert all of that 80 points into Fighting Spirit, you're left with another 20 Fighting Spirit to cast her burst. Now, first of all, obviously you can either do her normal attack, which actually requires you roughly around 14 to 15 normal attack, which is actually very long and not a very good way of gaining the stack. So the more and most efficient way is obviously going to be relying on your other Natlin support character to consume their own Night Cell point for Mavuika to get the stack, which of course does limit her team comp slightly. But if you're looking into it, a very important character on Mavuika team is going to be Citlali. On field Mavuika to trigger her Elemental Burst is going to be very hard if you don't have Citlali, because how Citlali Night Cell point consumption is after casting her E skill, do her 2 normal attack, and you already automatically consume all of her 90 Night Cell point, which obviously adds to Mavuika's. However, that is obviously not the only thing, because if you do look at her passive talent 2, the amount of Fighting Spirit Mavuika have whenever she casts her Elemental Burst also has the ability to buff the on-field character damage, right? So for every Fighting Spirit present whenever you cast your burst, you get a 0.2% increase with a 40% maximum damage increase this way. Obviously, it does decay over time at C0, but overall it is a very good passive. Therefore, you would always love to try and stack as much Fighting Spirit as you can on Mavuika, and the only thing I can think of you being able to do that a lot is by having at least 3 Natlin character on Mavuika team, which of course that is going to be Mavuika and Citlali. The other supportive character can be all around for a free to play, and potentially that's going to be a Citlali. But overall, an on-field DPS burst Mavuika is definitely going to be the way to go, because wow, if you are looking at her skilling, her skill damage at talent level 10 is already 800%. Not to mention, her other normal attack and charge attack during her Elemental Burst also gets buffed by the amount of Fighting Spirit that she has. And on top of that, her passive talent 2 buff her as well if she is on field, making her scaling of her Elemental Burst is definitely going to go way past 1000%, turning it to a pretty huge deal, because I don't think many character in Genshin Impact has access to a scaling of past 1000% at this point. Other than that, she do have her first passive talent, which of course whenever your party member casts Night Cell Burst, her attack is further increased by 30% for a 10 second, which is obviously more than enough because her on-field time is mostly just going to be a 7 second. So everything is focusing toward her attacking percentage, and that is completely huge. Now overall, that's basically everything for you to note about Mavuika playstyle. If she is on field, as I've mentioned before, her gameplay is very much similar to a Raiden Shogun, with on top of her E skill fighting alongside with her, but basically she has access to very powerful passive skilling that increases her attacking power very much. The only downside I would feel about Mavuika at this time is she's mostly going to be stuck with Natlin supporting character. I can almost guarantee you that, because she does require a lot of Night Cell point consumption in your party. But other than that, she is definitely shaping up to be literally the best DPS character in the game if this number stays and is not nerfed before her official release, which obviously is going to be a very exciting thing for those of you who are seeking a nice DPS character on your team. But while if you are already feeling that you have enough DPS character, then 5.3 is also getting you covered in terms of the supportive sub DPS side, and that gives us is Citlali. Oh my god. If you've been playing the story quest of Natlin, we've came across Citlali many of the time. He definitely has that Asian mom vibe, who are all around keep on getting scolded by her, and while with us traveling alongside with her, we do get some stray bullets here and there, but overall she is definitely a very cute character. Technically speaking, personally, I feel that I'm going to be investing into Citlali a lot more than Mavuika because she's definitely my personality type. I just really like Citlali as a character, but moreover, not just her personality, but her skill and kit is shaping up to be a very decent character as well. Last time we had a new cryo character, I think that was over a year ago. I think last time was Charlotte. Man, that was since Furina's banner. So a very long time ago. So what Citlali is able to do is whenever she casts her E skill, she is going to be providing you a cryo shield. Well, nothing too exciting because we do already have a couple of cryo shielder in Genshin, you know, Layla and Diona. And moreover, there are many good shielder out there as well. But the thing that sets Citlali apart from all the other shielder in the game is she is going to be having the capability of good damage number for your team. Because after you cast her E skill, and if she has at least 50 night support present, she is going to be summoning its Papa, which actually helps you to do a bit of off-field cryo damage and as well as application. A very simple skill once again, but do keep in mind that you are required to have her at least a 15 night support for her to trigger this, but I don't think that's going to be very hard to do if you always have her elemental burst cast every single rotation. So what her elemental burst does is she's going to be doing a very good nuking damage, as once again if you're looking into the scaling at level 10, it is almost an 1000% for a cryo support and shielder. So that's one thing, but other than that, she's going to be summoning like 3 spirit vessel skull to track your opponent, and it's going to detonate after some time doing AoE cryo damage. So a bit of a nice way to apply a little bit more cryo for you there. But overall, I think her cryo application is pretty decent. It's not too bad, but in terms of the damaging capability wise, Citlali is definitely going to be there. But the more interesting about her is when we start touching into her passive, because here whenever your party members triggers frozen or melt reactions, your opponent will have their pyro and hydro resistant shred by a 20%, which is interesting to me when I first read this, because this has absolutely nothing to do with any of the cryo teams or cryo DPS, but more like it's gonna be a good team addition to the pyro and hydro team arsenal. Not saying that pyro and hydro characters are already freaking powerful in Genshin Impact, but they just have to add another supportive character that widens the variety of their team comps by a multitude as well. So Citlali is definitely going to be a character that have good potential on those pyro teams, you know, wink wink Mavuika teams. Oh my god, because as I've mentioned before, she has a decent NISO point consumption for Mavuika fighting spirit stack. She provides you a decent shield, and she has the ability to apply cryo for Mavuika, not to mention the ability to have good damage number, because after her passive talent 2, her E skill and her burst does have a good amount of increase depending on how much EM you invest into her. So as I've mentioned before, these two new 5-star Natlin character is shaping up to be a very nice thing. As I've said, if you don't really need another DPS character on your account, even though Mavuika do have the ability to be a sub DPS character competitive to Xiangling, investing into a Citlali is not going to be a bad decision, which of course I'm going to be touching more on this at the end of the video, because obviously we cannot forget about the rerun character, as Arlecchino is technically going to be right here. I don't know, it seems like a weird decision on Hoyoverse side, because as we've discussed, Mavuika is shaping up to be one of, if not the best DPS character in the whole entire game. Arlecchino is a pure DPS character, so in terms of competitiveness, Arlecchino can't actually compete with Mavuika if you're looking for a DPS character. However, you know, if you think about it and you want to force a situation, you can have Mavuika and Arlecchino on the same team, because Mavuika can have sub DPS capability for Arlecchino, and her passive talent does give a bit, you know, like a roughly 20 to 30% buffing for Arlecchino, as I believe that passive does apply to any of the on-field character. So I mean that works, but in terms of, you know, competitiveness, obviously Arlecchino is not going to be there. However, if you are an Arlecchino enthusiast, you're looking for potentially investing in more into her, either pulling for her weapon or her constellations, I don't think that's actually a bad choice, because technically speaking, Arlecchino investment is a very good thing. Her constellation is one of the best constellation investment in the whole game. The more constellation you invest into her, obviously the more straight up powerful she's gonna get, and very much more powerful as well. And that goes for her specific weapon too. Obviously that does cost you the opportunity cost of potentially missing out on the 2 new Natlin character coming into the game. But obviously for those of you who has the preference for Arlecchino, overall she's still a very good pyro DPS character at C0, and even more so if you invest into her constellation. Some of her team have been updated slightly, especially after Shilonen came, so yeah, that's actually a pretty nice thing for Arlecchino, but other than that, her power level should still be roughly the same as when she was released, which is a good thing. Which leads us to another rerun character coming into the patch, and that is Clorinde. Now, I obviously don't really see any synergy from Clorinde towards any of the character coming into patch 5.3, other than, you know, if you want to force the matter again, then Mavuika probably has, you know, can work on Clorinde team in terms of either triggering overload or some other potential reaction for Clorinde, which obviously isn't bad. But again, Clorinde as a character is definitely a preference, especially if you look into the banner situation of 5.3, right? Now, Clorinde is definitely still Clorinde. She hasn't really changed since the moment she released. Obviously, she's one of the better electro DPS out there, because, you know, you can build some really nice team comp around Clorinde. But I obviously have just to say that she is more or less just a preference character at this point, pretty much just like how I always use Kuching as my main character because I love her, right? Obviously, if you invest more into her constellation, you will still do a lot better, but considering that there's so many good DPS characters out there, especially in 5.3, it is mostly clear to say that, you know, it's always not going to be a worthwhile pool unless you really love Clorinde as a character. So overall, I think that's everything about the character in 5.3. Hopefully you have either a refreshed idea or a more understanding of the character that are coming. Now we're moving on to the most important part of this video, which is obviously going to be discussing about which character is going to be best for you to invest in patch 5.3. Now this is obviously purely my opinion, but it's something that I would do myself if either I would not have any of this character on my account right now, or I'm thinking about, you know, upgrading it. So Mavuika and Citlali is definitely very tempting character to be pulling. But if you've been following my channel for quite a while, I always mostly value sub DPS and supports character a lot more than specific DPS character, because as you have seen, with the potential introductions of Mavuika being at the scaling that she has, most of the DPS character out there is probably going to be power crept already. While as I've mentioned, that does affect Nubla and Arlecchino as well. Some beta testers I've heard states that Mavuika is probably going to be around 10% better than Arlecchino and a few percent better than Noblet. Not to mention Mavuika has the ability to do sub DPS damage, right? So that's on the DPS side, which is why here in this case I basically value Citlali slightly more in terms of what she is capable of doing. Her damage power level is pretty decent. She's a new cryo character that we haven't got in a while. She's very cute as a character. Obviously you have to look at her elemental burst. That's way too damn cute. She has the ability to make your Hydro and Pyro team a lot better. Not to say that we already have technically some good resistant shredder out there in the game, but most of them don't have access to good damaging capabilities. Not to mention she has good ability to apply cryos to do better elemental reactions, which is actually very valuable. Now Mavuika, you know, it is the second option for me, but she's not that far behind because we already know her potentials. She has a good sub DPS capability, mostly going to be competitive towards Xiangling. But while the reason why she is on second place right now is because, well, you potentially have a C6 Xiangling. And while Xiangling is still one of the best 4-star character in the whole game, and considering that Genshin Impact is technically not that hard of a game, pulling for an extra Pyro DPS character, you know, obviously not a bad idea, but you can well save that Primo Gems for potentially more Citlali investment, for example. So obviously that's going to be your choice, but here that is how I am viewing the matter. And obviously third place is going to be Arlecchino. Yeah, another Pyro DPS character. Again, interesting how Hoyoverse is actually releasing so many Pyro DPS character in basically quite a short amount of time. But obviously after seeing the potential of Mavuika, I obviously can't recommend you to actively pull for Arlecchino unless you really like her at this point. And yeah, Clorinde definitely in the fourth place. Preference character wise, if you do decide to pull for her, I really wish you good luck. So guys, those are everything I have to say regarding the 5.3 banner. If you do have any question, leave it down in the comments, as I or some other lovely Genshin player will get to you there. If you're planning to pull for patch 5.3 characters yet you are still lacking in the Primo Gems, don't forget to check out Loot Bar, as I'm sure they will be very helpful to you. I really appreciate you guys staying with me till this part of the video, guys, and with that I wish you a super day, and I'll catch you on my next video.